Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachani Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Giradhar Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakti Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vachakabhatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we are in the, we discussed the first 9:10:54. Sukadev Goswami is speaking to King Parikshit and winding down the Mayana story, Ram's heroic rescue of Sita and slaying of Ravana. And this verse states, so I will share my screen. Ekapatni Vratadaro Jarshi Charita Suchi Swadharmam Brihamediyam Shikshayan Svayam Macharat. Ekapatni Vratadaraha, taking a vow not to accept a second wife or to have any connection with any other woman. Raja Rishi, like a saintly king. Charitaha, whose character. Shuchihi, pure. Swadharmam, one's own occupational duty. Riha Mediyam, especially a person's situated in household life. Shikshayan, teaching by personal behavior. Swayam, personally. Acharat, executed his duty. So translation, purport, by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Lord Ramchandra took a vow to accept only one wife and have no connection with any other women. He was a saintly king, and everything in his character was good, untinged by qualities like anger. He taught good behavior for everyone, especially for householders, in terms of Varnashram Dharma. Thus, he taught the general public by his personal activities. Ekapatni Vrata, accepting only one wife, was a glorious example set by Lord Ramachandra. One should not accept more than one wife. In those days, of course, people did marry more than one wife. Even Lord Ramachandra's father accepted more wives than one. Lord Ramachandra, as an ideal king, accepted only one wife, Mother Sita. When Mother Sita was kidnapped by Ravana and the Rakshasas, Lord Ramachandra, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, could have married hundreds and thousands of Sitas. But to teach us how faithful he was to his wife, he fought with Ravana and finally killed him. The Lord punished Ravana and rescued his wife to instruct men to have only one wife. Lord Ramchandra accepted only one wife and manifested sublime character, thus setting an example for householders. Householders should live according to the ideal of Lord Ramchandra, who showed how to be a perfect person. Being a householder or living with a wife and children is never condemned, provided one lives according to the regular principles of Varnashram Dharma. Those who live in accordance with these principles, whether as householders, brahmacharis, or vanaprasthas, are all equally important. Verse again, Lord Ramchandra took a vow to accept only one wife and have no connection with any other women. He was a saintly king, and everything in his character was good, untinged by qualities like anger. He taught good behavior for everyone, especially for householders, in terms of varnashram dharma. Thus, he taught the general public by his personal activities. So, before beginning to attempt to speak on this, I'd just like to seek blessings of all the assembled devotees, particularly Jadwaita Maharaj, uh, just blessings that I may say something other than the nonsense that I tend to normally speak, may have some benefit, some devotee somewhere. I don't know who that might be. With your blessings, it could be any one of us. It takes me a while to just get situated with this. All right. Um, so very interesting. One should not accept more than one wife. Uh, Prabhupada writes in his purport, and my wife keeps reminding me of this, and I resist. Um, there's a lot of interesting things here. Just looking down the purport, yes. Marriage actually means restriction. You know, and back in the old days, I guess at this point it's old days, um, marriage was seen as sort of like a license for, sex, as much as possible. It's legitimate, you're married, it's okay. Of course, at some point in time, uh, that shifted, and you didn't need marriage to have unrestricted sex. So first it was complete restriction, license for unrestricted sex. I'm talking about the real world, the regular world, the secular world, and then um, became like, well, you don't need marriage for sex, really. So it was just uh, naturally unrestricted. Of course, as devotees, we have the regular principles in place, and marriage means something different. Um, there's license for sex if one wants to have children. Then one gets married and one has sex for that purpose. And when one does so in that way, that sex is, Krishna says he is that sex. So that's extremely, I was going to say pious, it's beyond pious, it's transcendental. Krishna is the sex that true devotees have when their intention and purpose is to beget uh, children so that they can bring them up in a Krishna conscious manner and thereby release that soul from the clutches of Maya. That is the ideal, and um, people get married for that reason. So in the old days, like the Yuga old days, Prabhupada notes that there is common for men to have more than one wife, but the Lord Ram didn't go that route. He he looked, he searched for Sita until he found her, and then he brought to justice um, Ravana, the perpetrator. And it's interesting because, I mean, I can think of many politicians and other famous people. And interestingly enough, it's often people who, hammer the idea of family values, Not all the time, but often is the case. Um, you can read stories of these people in the public eye. Their wives, these men, their wives develop um, a terminal disease, cancer or something, and then they get caught cheating on the wives. So it's a very cheap thing, you know. Oh, my wife is sick now, I'll get another wife. Oh, my wife is old now, I'll get a younger wife. Oh, my wife is this, that. My wife is that, I'll do this. Um, there's no commitment there. There's no there's no selflessness. The objective is still a selfish one. But what is the purpose of marriage? It is not license for sense gratification. For a devotee, for anyone else, then you can make whatever purpose you want. But for a devotee, um, you could say the purpose of marriage is to beget children. If you're not going to beget children, I've heard this said, then there's no need to get married. Of course, in this day and age, it's difficult to go by that definition. Um, and many devotees get married for the companionship, even if they don't have children. But marriage, um, quite the uh, quite the contrary. Um, it's purification. It's for purification. You know, uh, a lot of you people live with people, right? Not the easiest thing in the world to live with somebody. Um, if you are married, you're living with one person or maybe more. If you're a brahmachari, you're still usually living with others in the ashram. Uh, but it's very difficult to live with somebody. And when issues arise, as they inevitably will, we have to understand it's for our own purification. It's not for us to fight for being right. It's a matter of compromise, and it's a matter of looking in the mirror to see my faults. If you live alone, it's easy to to not confront one's own flaws and faults. So when one gets married, the living mirror is there, saying, "This is your fault. That is your fault. This is your flaw. This is your foible. This is your shortcoming." You know, all different kinds of ways. Uh, and we have to know that very often Krishna is speaking through this person. Now, it's not all the time, but we have to be able to be open to accepting some responsibility for our faults. So, and it can be very difficult. You know, if you're in a marriage, you know that um, you often get into um, fights, arguments, what have you, just issues where there's a lot of tension and it's very uncomfortable and it's very awkward. And then hopefully you come out of them and the bond is still there. There needs to be uh, there needs to be love, and the love comes from having Krishna in the center. It's been said before that marriage is not a line between two people. It's a triangle. It's a triad where there's the one person, the second person, and the Lord is the third component of the marriage and the most important component of the marriage. Placing Krishna in the center of the relationship will help us to use the Grahastha ashram in order to attain the goal, Krishna consciousness. So we have to accept our purification because I am the guru of my wife, and my wife is the guru of me, and we have our own Diksha gurus, and we have Krishna. So we have to um, really learn to accept our partner in that way. It's very easy to forget, if you're married to a devotee, that my spouse is a devotee as well. You know, it's easy for grahastas to want to serve the devotees, serve the devotees, serve the devotees, and then treat the spouse um, as a second-class citizen or something. But your spouse is a devotee. So how do we miss that? Serve your spouse as an offering to Guru, as an offering to Krishna. Um, if you happen to be married to a non-devotee, then you should remember that your spouse is a devotee. Yeah, your spouse may not be practicing Krishna consciousness, may be practicing something else. Your spouse may be an atheist, but that atheist spouse of yours is also a devotee. That atheist spouse of yours is also very, very, very dear to Krishna. No less dear to Krishna than anyone on this call right now. So you are serving the devotee in that spirit. If you serve the devotee, if you serve your spouse in that spirit, that he or she is a devotee and is loved limitlessly by Krishna, then that becomes an act of devotional service. So how is it that um, serving a spouse is devotional service? Is by remembering that that this person is loved by Krishna and served by Guru who wants to please Krishna uh, by taking care of one who is dear to Krishna, taking care of one uh, who uh, deserves our loving care. But so much of it is our intention. So just to say, like, well, because they're my husband, because they're my wife, is one thing. We have to bring Krishna into it. So, purpose of marriage is also learning selflessness, living on our own. You know, for a long time when I first uh, became associated with devotees, I figured I would stop pursuing relationships. But I was already in my mid 30s at the time, and I didn't want to move into an ashram. I couldn't move into a temple. I mean, I could have, but I didn't want to move into a temple or an ashram because I was already, you know, middle aged, changing my lifestyle and everything too much. Okay, I won't. I'll live like a brahmachari, but I'll live in on my own in the world. I had my job. I'll continue my job. I'll sort of live a grahastha. So I wasn't quite though fully grahastha because I wasn't married, but I wasn't really a brahmachari, although I was trying to live by the principles of brahmacharya. So it's sort of a grahasthachari, you could say, living in that in-between space. Um, but I still had that license to live a selfish lifestyle because I didn't have that immediate mirror. That person would act as a mirror for me and um, tell me tell me where I needed uh, correction, where I needed to turn around, change what I was doing. Um, so by accepting marriage, we're accepting the, the increased potential for selflessness. And again, instead of getting bitter or resentful when our spouse does this service for us, um, we need to accept it as like, yes, I must be more selfless, purification. Now, being on the other end of that, we have to be careful because I'm my wife's spouse, and it's not like, yes, where are your faults? I'll let you know. It's not like that. Uh, we're loving and we're caring, and when things come up in a mood of service, we can let the other person know. But it's got to be respectful. It's got to start with that foundation that my spouse is a devotee and they deserve my utmost respect. Um, for men particularly, but not exclusively, marriage is also a way to soften the heart. To soften the heart. Um, a lot of men keep this rigidity, they hold themselves in this this machismo, I'm a man, and bhakti is about uh, the softening of the heart. So by, especially with living with a feminine, a female energy, it increases that softness of heart. But again, just by dint of living with someone and trying to be selfless, accepting uh, uh, criticism as purification, the heart softens, and being um, aware of the fact that this is devotional service, and I'm taking care of this person, I'm nurturing this person, I'm trying to help this person advance their spiritual lives, I'm trying to help this person with their material life as well, that it's doing this in service to Krishna, and the heart gets softer, and the heart gets softer. With that softer heart, I can offer that heart to Krishna because Krishna responds with soft heart. So in the beginning of ISKCON, it was much more difficult. ISKCON does not have a great history regarding marriage. Um, it's often spoken about um, family life being, the dark well of material existence. And there are verses that talk about it like that. It's a dark well. Um, but I, the way I see it, the meaning here has been twisted and perverted over history in such a way to facilitate um, misogyny that may have been uh, in the heart of some men devotees in the early days. Um, Women became the enemy. The dark well, from my perspective, is that it makes it much easier to get entangled in material nature. And that's a fact. And why is that a fact? Is because is because of love in a way. You know, you get married, and if it's a proper married, there's love and there's attachment. The spouse, you have children, there's love and attachment to the children, and it can potentially make it easier to forget why we're getting married and to forget why we're having children and to go into just the material um, happiness, the material satisfaction that is having a family. In a in a way, it's because family life is so nice that it's easy to lose sight of the goal. The goal is Krishna, and to start living a materially based life. So you start falling down into that dark well, or um, maybe it's a difficult image because you're falling down. But even if you're like walking into a dark cave, like straight ahead rather than down, it gets darker and darker, and pretty soon you've lost your way and you can't get out um, because you potentially left Krishna out of the equation. Where am I? I'm lost. So, to my understanding, that's how marriage is a dark well. It can be. By the same token, um, in a way, sannyas can be a dark well if you lose sight of Krishna to the extent that you're sort of uh, reveling in the adulation that you receive. People bowing at your feet, washing your feet, looking to you as the all-knowing, looking to you as the savior. Uh, you know, all the gurus of ISKCON, they bow down at your lotus feet thousands and thousands of times because how do you receive all of that adulation and still remain aloof from the desire for more distinction and prestige. Um, but it can happen when you get so puffed up with yourself. Krishna is somewhere in the back there, and you're in a dark well. You're in a dark cave, and it looks like you're totally marching toward Krishna. Internally, uh, you're on some selfish trip, and maybe Advaita Maharaj could speak to how, in fact, one can stay aloof from it, because he certainly has been able to stay aloof. Wonderful example. So at some point along the line, women became the enemy. There was a movement, which didn't, movement is too grand a word, but there was an idea at some point by a small group of men that maybe we should send all the women to Australia. That way they'll just be removed. It's not about women. It's about me having that idea. At one point, some men approached Srila Prabhupada uh, requesting that women not give class. And some of the men are getting disturbed by seeing women give class. Prabhupada's response was, well, tell those men to go live in the forest. So it's not that women shouldn't give class. It's that men are so easily disturbed, then you're going to be disturbed all the time. Because if you're preaching and you're out in the world, you're seeing women all the time. If this is your problem, then the only solution is to become a Babaji, go off in the forest. And of course, this misogyny snowballs and leads to abuse. In ISKCON, unfortunately, there's a history of the abuse of women. And then you have the children, and of course, there's the abuse of children. And we've gone through all of this. And as a religious institution, we're certainly not alone. But I commend ISKCON as an institution because I know that we have gone through great measures to admit to past mistakes, stop covering up these gross offenses, and to transcend them. So, so the first generation of ISKCON devotees, they made a lot of mistakes in this regard. They have not made more mistakes, though, than I would have made if I were in their position. They may not have been the same mistakes, but I need to say that the first generation of ISKCON devotees, Prabhupada's disciples, all of you, every single one of you, have my eternal gratitude, because there's naturally going to be mistakes, starting a worldwide movement that none of you even realized for a long time was going to be a worldwide movement. Or in the beginning, it was just Prabhupada had this vision. But you all went through such austerity and made such sacrifices in order to build this institution based on your faith in and love for Srila Prabhupada, that you made it, you created this. So I, decades later, can walk into an established temple that had heat, indoor plumbing, air conditioning in many cases, and it was an established institution, and I could benefit my spiritual life based on your sweat and your toil and your blood that you put into this. So yeah, of course there are mistakes, some egregious, but, um, but without you, people like all of us scattered here would be lost. So I sincerely thank you to your service to all of us in that regard, and your service to Srila Prabhupada and being his instruments to spread Lord Chaitanya's mission. So now most of us are grihastas. And let me just take a look at this report here. Yes. householder should live according to the ideal of Lord Ramchandra, who showed how to be a perfect person. To the Bhagavad Gita, third chapter, verse 21, where Krishna says, whatever action a great man performs, common men follow. And whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. So even way back then, when it was accepted for our benefit, a couple yugas later, Ramchandra was showing how to be the ideal. So Prabhupada writes, being a householder or living with a wife and children is never condemned, provided one lives according to the regulated principles of Varnashram Dharma. Those who live in accordance with these principles, whether as householders, brahmacharis, or vanaprasthas, are all equally important. Right. So being a householder, living with a wife and children is never condemned. So yeah, so we went through it. For a time there in this time, it was condemned. But that was a misunderstanding. As long as, very important part, but provided one lives according to the regulative principles of Varnashram Dharma. One is living according to the principles, regulative principles of Varnashram Dharma, then marriage is, as Prabhupada says, equally important ashram. It can bring you the lotus feet of the Lord just as much as any other ashram. It's not that it's inferior. Remember, there's a bit of a hierarchy here. Brahmacharya graduate to Grihastha, graduate to Vanaprastha, graduate to Sannyas. Of course, if one remains brahmachari for their whole life, that is also okay. That's also that calling is just for certain people. It's not for everyone. In the beginning of the movement, Prabhupada definitely encouraged brahmacharya. He probably discouraged marriage for many disciples. He was starting, again, a worldwide movement. He needed full-time, dedicated, full-time, devoted people, devotees, whose main focus was helping him spread the movement. So, therefore, yeah, he, he encouraged brahmacharya, and he encouraged sannyas. He gave sannyas to dozens of men who were in their early mid-20s. ISKCON has standards now. I don't know what they are, so I can't guess it, but I know that there are certain standards before taking sannyas, a certain amount of time, and I believe it's a sizable chunk of time before you take sannyas, because we've seen many of them fall. And it's not surprising in a way, because Prabhupada gave them sannyas at such an early age for a specific purpose. But there's falling, from sannyas, maybe they get married and they're still practicing bhakti yoga, and there's falling and they go away back into secular life. And those are two extremely different things. Yeah. So this last statement, those who live in accordance with these principles, whether it's householders, brahmacharis, or vanaprasthas, are all equally important. And being a householder is never to be provided there according to regular principles. So that means also that being a brahmachari or a sannyasi, if you're a brahmachari or sannyasi who doesn't live in accordance with these principles, that is condemned. It's equally condemned. So the point here is, no matter what your ashram is, that if you don't live according to the principles of the yoga, principles of Varnashram Dharma, then that is, it's not that because you're married and I'm not, or you're not married and I am. No. Live the principles. No matter what ashram you're in, your future is very bright. yeah, so I was in this grihastachari position, as I said, and and we need to be honest with ourselves. Like I said, for brahmachari, to remain a brahmachari, you need really specific calling, because especially being brought up in the West, it's not for everyone, and you need to be. We all need to be honest with ourselves. So I was living this grihastachari life quite happily. I had a small apartment. I was on my own. I spent a lot of time at the temple. I hung out with the brahmacharis at the temple, and I had a job in the world. I was working in the theater, and there was an intern, a young girl, um, who was working at the theater as an intern, and she would see me and chant. I would in those days I was doing 2 shows a night on weekends, and I would be chanting to this long corridor that led from the green room, which is like the holding area for the actors, to the stage. And I would walk up and down, and I would chant in between shows. And she became curious as to what I was doing, so I told her what I was doing, and she wanted to learn more about it. So I gave her this little paperback book, On the Way to Krishna. I don't know if it's published anymore. And she read it, and she found it a little interesting. Um, she was a teenager at the time, and she kept asking me questions about it. And I developed a friendship with this young girl. And I didn't know that she was an Orthodox Jew at the time. She was Jewish and Orthodox. Um, and at one point, she said that she went home and she told her parents, I want to be a Hare Krishna and a vegetarian. And her parents freaked out, quite unsurprisingly. So at one point, she said to me, would you mind um, coming over the house one time and meeting my mother because she wants to talk to you? And I thought, yeah, well, this is good. So I was in my late 30s, I guess, and I was kind of friends with this teenage girl. And so I could see why that would look a little weird. So yeah, absolutely, sure, sure. And I drove her home from the theater. Is that one? Maybe no, it was probably not that late. So yeah, anyway, I drove over to the house, sure, and I met her mother. And when on the way there, and I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about like meeting the mother. I was like, oh, okay. So I don't know. I guess I was maybe imagining my own mother, like that kind of book. Okay, I can say this and I can say this, and I meet the mother, and I sort of did a double take. That's called comedy. That's called a double take. You look once, you look twice. Like what? Because this woman did not look like my mother. Uh, okay. There was what I'm saying is there was an immediate uh, attraction that I couldn't deny. Um, it it wasn't like overwhelming, but it was there, and I started to spend time with this woman because she uh, she had a lot of questions, and she wanted to know what her daughter was getting involved with. It was all quite reasonable. Um, so I brought her to the temple. I introduced her to the devotees, and gave her some books to read. She met the devotees. She read the books, and we actually became very good friends. We became very good friends, and that attraction was there, but it was it was manageable, you know. But what really superseded it was the attraction of, as a person that I have, the respect I have, and the friendship that developed. So time went by. She accepted that her daughter wanted to be a devotee at that time, and I'm kind of making a long story short here. Um, Over time, she and her husband divorced, and um, we maintained our friendship through the whole thing. And time passed. Uh, her daughter, I remember, was actually trying to fix us up a little bit. she said to me, her daughter saying to me, I know you don't want to get married, but does that mean you'll never get married or you might get married? So, yeah, my relationship with this woman deepened to the extent that we got married. And so, of course, I'm talking about my wife, Akanta Bhakti. Um, is the mother, is still the mother of this girl. And we have, she, I never wanted to get married, even before I became a devotee. But, but getting to know her, I really felt like there was some unfinished business from a previous lifetime. My respect for her and my love for her is that, and and I couldn't deny it. The point I'm getting at is, uh, although I wanted intellectually not to get married and to stay in this position here, uh, thought this feels like unfinished business from another lifetime. Do I want to finish up this business in the next lifetime, or should I finish it up now? Let me get married now. And so I thank Krishna for the wisdom to understand myself at least enough to the extent that um, uh, that I can sort of not do what I had my. I guess what I'm saying is that I was flexible enough to change my plan based on the reality that was facing. Um, so I guess I will leave it there and see if there are any final comments, questions, or something in the chat box. Hare Krishna, wonderful topic. Me and ISKCON have embraced so much of the Vaishnava culture from India. Somehow our divorce rate reflects the values of the West. That's right, Rohini. How can we instill in our devotee culture the values of India regarding marriage, where they have such a low divorce rate? It's really my take on this, and I'm open to hearing from others, is that, you know, we're a cultural transplant, but you can't, in any transplant, you lose some blood, right? So there are things that just don't necessarily translate to the Western culture. Taking the Vedic culture, I'd say, and putting it in the Western context, there's a lot there that can stick, but there's a lot there that can't stick. So whereas arranged marriages are often very successful in India, and not alone, often in Orthodox Jewish circles too, do arranged marriages. Depending on the mentality of the people involved, um, it doesn't always work. Doesn't mean it will never work. But the divorce rate is high when the things I discussed earlier, I think, are not in place. When Krishna is not in the center, when we cannot accept the relationship of the dynamic as purification, when our selfishness does not subside, when our hearts do not soften. Of course, if there's abuse in a relationship, I personally would advocate that the person being abused gets out of that relationship. So, uh, so instilling the devotee culture that we have to instill in order to cut back the divorce rate, I think, is an internal culture, not an external culture. Because too much we embrace the external culture. Like people make a big deal, some people make a big deal, wear a dhoti, wear a sari. Um, or wearing tilak, for example. Usually when I do these classes, I'm wearing tilak, but this morning was a little hectic, so I didn't put on the clay. Every morning I put on tilak, right? Put it on with water, which is acceptable. Um, somewhere. that you can put it on with water. So every day I put it on with water, and from time to time I put it on with clay. So so do these external things, do these external things. But meanwhile, if our internal culture is still Western, it's not going to work. So I think that's what it is. So if we want to sort of assuage the divorce rate in this economy, we have to embrace the internal culture of this economy, deepen our bhakti. Then we are more likely to coexist with each other and grow together in bhakti, serve together, deal with our differences the way devotees deal with each other, not the way one devotee deals with an army. There always needs to be the foundation of respect. So I don't know if that's helpful. That's what I got right now. If anybody else wants to chime in, please do. Tina writes, thank you for sharing the sweet story of how you met into bhakti. Love hearing all the interesting, wonderful ways. Yes, Krishna does work. They say that the Lord works in mysterious ways, and that is really a fact. And you know, the more that one surrenders to the Lord, the more one sees the depths of the mysterious ways in which Krishna works. So we're about 8:05 here. If there's nothing else, I'll just thank you for your kind attention and wish you the best for the rest of your day. Hare Krishna. Henry, Hari Bol. I was wondering if that was the Henry I saw. It is. Thanks for being here, bro.